win friends and influence people? I guess I would ask a question: is it win friends and influence people, or is it win friends to influence people, or is it just to influence people? So we might want to just think about that. But obviously with this title, then, you know, we have to think of certain people. Actually, it's a great subject for me, as John said, because I'm a business child of the 80s. So so Dale Carnegie, NLP, and the 80s all work for me great. So we can't have the subject without thinking about Dale Carnegie in his book How to Win Friends and Influence People. And this is the first edition. This is the cover of the first edition. I think if you go onto Google and look for a picture of the book, there's hundreds. It's been printed so many times. To sum it up, I thought if we're going to go through it, then there's really 30 principles. And I had a word with John, and if I spend 2 minutes on each of the principles going through, then there's about 15 minutes for chat at the end, or perhaps not, because actually, if you look at the first cover, he actually at the front sort of sums it up quite well in three areas. And I'm not going to go through them, but there's if you talk about likability, winning people over, or changing their point of view, and he has 6 points on likability. So I'm not going to read them out. You can very quickly look through that, but it's actually, you'll see some themes coming out, which I'll come back to in a moment. And these are things that, I guess, looking at John's video from his post, you know, the question is, do we do this, or do we do the opposite? And is that a turnover, a turn off rather for people? The problem, and I asked for your sympathy, having done just a little bit of research on this. There's so much in American that you end up starting to speak American and using American words. So if I do, I apologize. But yeah, three main areas in his book, and you'll see really that there's some themes coming through. And if we want to just distill that a little bit more, then perhaps we can distill it into 3 key areas, which is don't criticize or complain, appreciate people sincerely, and appeal to other people's interests. I don't know how many people here have read the book. Is that something that most people have done? You've probably heard of it, but if you haven't read it, and so really, I mean, it's all about looking at the other person. Now, the other part of what John asked me to talk about was NeuroLinguistic Programming, and that works with this, and I'll go on to that and perhaps come back and sort of bring the two back together again. But NeuroLinguistic Programming, what is it? We've probably all heard of it, body language and all that sort of thing. And actually the description is actually in the words there. So neuro, the mind, linguistic, how we talk, and programming, it affects us. So, and it can be used in 2 different ways. I've used it in 2 different ways, because we all think about it's about influencing others. And how do we get people to do what we want them to do? But actually, you can use it for yourself, for your own self-confidence. And if we're talking about not doing the things that we shouldn't be doing because they're going to have a bad effect on people, then we can actually use neurolinguistic programming for that as well. And we can actually change our own behavior. So as I say, I think it's a misnomer that people think that, you know, NLP is just about having an influence on other people. And it's not all about spotting lies and untruths. You know, the eye movement's part of it, and looking to the right up, or looking to the right across, or looking to the left, or looking down. you know, that's an element, but there's a lot more to it, and we can actually use it very usefully. So NeuroLinguistic programming techniques. Once again, there's probably lots of us here who have actually gone through courses. So, you know, I'm probably talking to people who know exactly, but I just thought I'd bring out sort of 5 of the key areas that we might like to just think about. That's not to say that we have to go through courses, but if we're looking at the subject, then active listening. And I've put there proper listening. You know, do we actually listen to what people are saying? I mean, we all know that you know, one of my pet hates on the TV is listening to or watching interviewers interviewing somebody, and they've got a script, and they're sticking to their script, and they ask a question and they haven't listened to what the answer is, because they then ask a question which has actually been answered in the previous answer, and you think, you know, why are you not listening? But you know, do we do that sometimes as well? You know, when we're in a sort of business situation that we're actually, you know, we go in with our menu and we're not listening to what the person is saying. I guess there's a difference here between, are we trying to get something out of one appointment, or are we trying to get something, you know, from a series and getting to know somebody? And this is, you know, we've talked about hunters and farmers before. But, you know, active listening, are we actually taking in what somebody is saying to us? And we actually building a picture of that person from what they're saying? And are we actually leading that conversation to find out more? Anchoring is another word that you've probably heard. And anchoring is just having sort of key areas that, you know, will hopefully appeal to people. And they're points that you can bring up, you know, over again to re-emphasize, and also to get on the right side of people. Now, you're probably thinking, why has he got that background there? I mean, it's got nothing to do with what he's talking about. But you see, I'm thinking that there's somebody here that might appeal to. And he's smiling, so obviously it has appealed to him. So, you know, Guy with his diving and his, you know, marine environmental interest and whatever, I thought, you know, a couple of those dolphins there jumping would appeal to him. But you know, anchoring is a technique that we can use, and it's amazing the impact that it has. And it's not just words. It can be other senses like smell. And you know, the classic one is probably, if you're trying to sell your house, you know, put some fast bake rolls in the oven and brew some fresh coffee, because the smell of that around the house makes a big impact on the people that are coming in. So just as an example, word power, obviously, you know, use words that actually conjure up images from the people, and that comes from the active listening. You know, if you know there are things that are actually going to trigger their imagination, then use that word power. Mirroring is something that we've probably all heard of quite a lot, and you know, it's actually mirroring somebody's body language, you know, how they're sitting. But you can mirror them in a number of different ways as well. And I've just highlighted it as empathy. Once again, you know, the idea of this is to just throw some ideas out and let's get some talking. But you know, in what you're saying to somebody as well is actually go along with what they're talking about. It's very easy to say, yes, that's great, but, and then try and move on to something else, but actually show empathy. And staying positive is a key as well. So from neuro-linguistic programming techniques, you know, what can you take away? What are the keys for me? Listening, being empathetic, and for me, because that came out of what John was saying, and he was asking sort of what works for me, is humor. If you go back to Dale Carnegie, one of his key points all the time is smile, but be happy. So if we're looking at these two elements, I'd like to throw some questions out. And the questions would be looking at those sort of things. Do you like your customers? Do you need to like your customers? Do you want to like your customers? And do they need to like you?
Okay.
I just to throw in one example, because it was interesting, actually yesterday I had a meeting yesterday and for Norwich Door to Door, and I thought I'd just throw this in because it was a bit of NLP actually. It's a very large charity, and we were talking about how we could work together, but it's a charity that has its own transport for its own service users, and on the face of it, nothing that we could use. But by getting the conversation to go around to what else would they like to do, or where do they see that there's a need that they could generate more revenue, then they have a very high state-of-the-art kitchen and dining facilities, which they only use very rarely during the day. It stands there not being used. And taking that around, then of course they came to the idea that, well, they could actually use it for the community, and they could have community lunches and things like that there for the people. And strangely enough, it all seemed great. We went along, and then, well, what's the hurdle to all that? Transport. How are we going to get the people there? Well, funnily enough, it's Norwich Door to Door that can provide the transport. So there we are. We are now in a joint venture to look up setting some lunch clubs up at this venue. Anyway, just as an example. I'd just like to throw in that going back to Dale Carnegie, it's not just about business as well, because if you read his book, then there's also 7 rules for making home life happier. And these are very important. Don't nag, don't try to get one over on your partner, don't criticize, give honest appreciation. That's the Americanism. It means pay little attention. So it means give compliments all the time, not pay little attention, John. Okay. Be courteous. And I like the 7th one. But I end with a warning. That is Charles Manson used the book, Dale Carnegie's book, and what he learned from the book in prison, he was able to manipulate women into killing on his behalf. So just be careful what you wish for and how you use it. Okay, that was just a quick synopsis, and hopefully some questions there to